All right, good afternoon from Australia. As the sun is preparing to set where we are, Yannick and I are here to share with you for 60 minutes how to ace your digital marketing. We know that everyone is really hungry for the quick fixes so that they can just get on with their digital thing. But the big question is here whether you can. This is not going to be your typical sort of 7 hacks to digital success seminar, but Yannick and I here to help you bridge sort of the perspective and the understanding of modern science and that science of marketing, and then obviously bridging that gap to how do we practically use that knowledge, that information to be successful with our digital marketing endeavors. Yannick will tell you a little bit more about that framework that we're going to be teaching you today in order to master your digital marketing. But for now, let's have a quick look at some of the powerful numbers that, I guess, justify why everyone is so hungry to master digital marketing. So there's about 3.96 billion people that are using social media today. That's more than half of the world's population. And if we actually take into consideration that social media companies are restricting the use of their platforms to people that are age 13 and above, that means actually it's almost 2/3 of the world's total population that is on social media. So there's no doubt that since COVID has hit us, we have seen these massive shifts in how much time people spend on social and other digital channels. And obviously this has to do because people were forced to spend more time indoors, and that happened all around the world. So we already saw this sort of natural inclination towards more people getting online and spending more time online, but it was really sort of accelerated to a whole nother level with the pandemic. So social media and Messenger has then not just showed up, but exponentially showed up. And we've also seen that across a lot of the streaming services and people even spending time in their email inboxes. So for anyone working in not-for-profit, in government, anyone that's interested in changing human behavior, we need to understand where people are spending their time and their energy and where they want to hear from us, because we have to manage these rapid shifts from an organizational perspective. So Tom Kaiser, the CEO of Hootsuite, said, and I would like to quote him here, organizations need a holistic approach to managing their social and digital communications so that they can remain connected while also listening to the changing social conversations to help ensure they are purposefully engaging with their audience. So let me tell you that for a successful digital endeavor and a successful social media strategy, you need to be strategic. You need to ask some essential questions before you go and create any type of content. And that framework needs to really help you to go back to some of the foundational principles of marketing that still apply in this digital domain. And most importantly, help you to really objectively, not your personal opinion or anyone else's opinion that just shouts the loudest, to objectively gauge what is working and what is not working. And before we start to talk about this framework, I still want to talk to you a little bit about some of those digital revolutionary aspects that we have seen recently. So obviously with a big spike in usage rates, we've also seen stock prices go into one particular direction, and that is up. And all of these players here have benefited essentially from this lockdown. Players that were already so powerful before we even had the lockdown that, one obviously has to rightfully ask whether so much power for a corporation is a healthy thing. But that's obviously not the point of this conversation and this presentation today. The point is here to say that we need these powerhouses essentially, and we need to work with them in order to reach those people that we care about and that we want to transform, right? So let's have a look at some of these complex journeys. And I deliberately want to put out one of the most complex consumer-based sort of journeys, and that is the journey to purchasing a home. And the reason why it's a good example also to think about this from a behavior change perspective is because it's a long journey, it's a difficult journey, and it's a journey where there's high involvement with the decision. And the first thing I want to ask you here when you're working in the change sector, how well do you understand the journey that your target audience and the people that you are seeking to serve are undertaking? How well are you understanding that from start to finish? From the point that they may have never heard from you to the point that they will, come to your offering, explore your offering, and hopefully transact and engage in your behavior change offer. So when we look at this real estate journey, we can see that it is almost 2 years on average that a person in Australia spends between the time that they start to dream of buying their home, which is a really important thing here in Australia, obviously, to the time that they actually are really in the market and ready to transact. So if you look at all the online and also offline touch points, the important thing to understand is here, how do you show up? Where do you show up? And where can you add value in that respective journey? So as you're exploring and thinking about what that means for you, I want to sort of tell you where the gold standard is. We ultimately all want to be in a one-to-one kind of engagement opportunity with the people that we wanting to serve, because most of us are fundamentally different and are taking very unique journeys online across the various channels. So that individualization, that tailorization, that sort of hyper-targeted approach is what we want to deliver against and what we want to provide people with that want to engage with us. I'm not saying that we all have to be there and we all have to do that by tomorrow, but that's sort of the ultimate best practice. That means you're there when people want to hear from you and they want to have that personalized feeling, that assistance factor of how are you helping them to improve their lives. And if we're working in behavior change, we often don't come across that way. But our commercial counterparts do that incredibly well, but they don't always arguably have our health and well-being and longevity at their interest. So what do we have to ask ourselves? We have to ask ourselves where we sit as an organization. And so for that, before Yannick will talk about our framework, I want you to assess where you are currently. So whether you're working in a respective government department or you have a leadership function or you're communication manager or a policy officer, whatever that may be, the question you have to ask yourself is where and in what type of organization am I sitting in? So this digital capability assessment is a great starting point that we use with a lot of our organizations that we work with to figure out where they sit. And this was developed by David Chaffee from Smart Insights, very intelligent fellow, who essentially gives us 7 digital capacity criteria. So you can see them here on the left-hand side: strategic approach, performance improvement, management buy-in, resourcing and structure, et cetera, et cetera. And then it allows you to essentially assess on what level of capability you sit at. So from having absolutely zero strategy to a market-leading capability, which would be level 5. And I want to ask yourself here, you ask yourself here at this point in time, where you would sit, where your organization specifically would sit, no matter how small or how big it actually is. So usually, we like to ask this as a polling question. So if anyone wanted to share with us, this can be a little bit delicate information, but even if you just want to throw in a number here into the chat in terms of 1, you see yourself more at that initial stage, or 2, you're more at that managed, or potentially you see yourself at stage 4, quantified, or even 5, optimized, we would love to hear from you. So feel free to pop that into the chat functionality here for us. And as you do so, the good news really is that there's only about 2% of businesses that kind of sit in that optimized category. The rest, probably predominantly, is really still trying to figure things out. And the good news is also that even Google is quite conservative in terms of their capability. And whilst they haven't used this particular framework, they probably also are still sitting more at a 4 than at a 5. So when we do engage with a lot of organizations and we talk about the most frequent challenges that they face for their digital marketing, these are, 4 of the most prominent ones that do come up. And obviously there's many that you may have, but what we often see is that there is zero strategy, so no plan in place that aligns with the overarching strategy, which then means that fundamentally people are super busy creating content, but they don't even know why they're doing it. And they're just busy doing that without even knowing why they're doing it in the first place. And they have no real metrics to, articulate whether this is really helping their efforts in their daily operations. We also, as a result of that, if there's no plan, we know that there's no specific objectives in place and people focus on the wrong metrics. So I've heard many organizations tell me that we have a budget and we're spending it and we're growing our reach and we're growing our following, and that's great. It doesn't go beyond that. But we have to move beyond these vanity metrics to really assess why we're doing it in the first place and for what particular objective. And then assess that on an ongoing basis. And we'll talk to you about that today. Many organizations try to master digital without a digital budget or very little one. We strongly suggest that that is revisited in order to make sure that you do dedicate sufficient spend on your digital endeavors. And last but not least, too many cooks in the kitchen, essentially. Silo operations, people shouting at the same customer from all kinds of angles without actually having mapped out an entire customer journey to figure out, well, how do we serve these people and who within our organization is talking to these people at which point in time. So it's not surprising that we have about 50% of businesses that tell us that they don't have any strategy in place. And that is even higher when we talk to some of the not-for-profits or governmental departments and their respective strategies. So I think this is now my handover signal to talk to hand over to Yannick to tell you a bit about our framework and how it came to be.
Thank you, Timo. So yes, about 5 years ago, Timo and I were steeped in digital marketing work for our university, our clients, and we witnessed more organizations and governments being disrupted by digitization. And because you are here at this webinar, I assume that you will be aware of the incredible amount of influence that the internet has had on your organization. And especially now, COVID-19 forces you to conduct more of your work online. So this digital disruption also changes the skill sets that are required of modern marketers. And many organizations and marketers are just not prepared for this. And we recognize that more people were struggling to take a strategic approach to digital marketing. And Timo and I are born and raised in Germany and the Netherlands, respectively. So we are quite process-oriented. And so we went on the hunt for a stepwise process to help guide our digital marketing efforts. And working in academia, we recognize the importance of theory, and we required something theoretically grounded, but to our surprise, there were no tested digital marketing frameworks out there. So we had no choice but to create a framework ourselves. And that took us many rounds of revisions, experimentation, many debates amongst each other. So there was a lot of yelling and unfortunately a lot of laughter involved as well. And we applied our framework in practice. We learned from the experience. We went back to the drawing board. We improved the model, then tested it with our clients and students in our master classes. And then we improved again. And now we have what we call a game-changing framework for marketing success. And that is the 5-step digital marketing process. And this follows the essentials of marketing theory combined with a practical approach to mastering your digital marketing efforts. And this 5-step marketing approach has been taught to thousands of people through our digital marketing and content marketing masterclasses, our teaching, our in-house consultancy, keynote, and workshop deliveries. So ranging from marketing managers to communication managers, from founders to government employees, from entrepreneurs to academics, professionals from all walks of life apply this process to get more success online. So here it is, a 5-step process. So let's look at these steps briefly. First, we talk about, or we explore your voice. And this is all about getting to know who your organization or department really is. And this is a deep dive into articulating your identity and identifying your voice. And if you don't know this, you will struggle to communicate with your audience, which is number 2. So you need to understand the people you seek to serve. And this is more than just telling me that you're serving everyone or telling that you're after mothers aged 30 to 50. It's about creating personas. And creating personas is more than just that. It is about grouping together a tribe of like-minded people that share the same worldviews and the same values, or both. Number 3 is the hourglass, and this is what we call the heart of the 5-step process, the command center that will help you to get truly strategic in your digital efforts. And this takes the emotion and personal opinion out of the equation and will set your digital endeavors up for success. Number 4, this is about content. This is where you can start to play with content curation, creation, and distribution, and also dabble into SEO and social media, etc. Number 5 is engage. And here you pull the trigger and get the machine running and operating. And if you make it here, you are at the point where you start to see the data coming in, and then you can assess whether things are working or not, and alter the course however needed. So let me ask you, can you please put in the chat what step of this marketing process you require the most, where you have the most room for improvement? Where do you need the most info? And we could perhaps even tailor the presentation according to those preferences. So don't be shy, just hit a figure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the comments, and to see where you guys are at. And in the meantime, I will just continue with this presentation. So now you know the overarching marketing framework. Let's zoom into each of the steps. First, I'd like to tell a story. So imagine that you live in the year 10,000 BC. You sit around the bonfire with your tribe. There is no Netflix, there is no YouTube, no Instagram, no videos to watch, no emojis to send, no likes to give. And in this time, and in the countless 1,000 years before that, the way in which people connect was through stories. And so stories are the primary means of making sense of the world and connecting with others. And today, that is still the case. And especially since COVID has changed the way in which we communicate and relate to each other. And so while we are distanced from each other, we try to bring the world together through a common narrative, like we see at this festival today. So through this shared story, we try to bring each other on the same page. And that narrative, that storytelling is deeply rooted in our culture. And so if you consider the product or the service that you are offering, you would conclude that it has a history, or perhaps in better words, a story. And that story should be compelling, because we all love stories. As I said, that's how people connect. So your voice or your brand narrative needs to be attention grabbing and relatable, and needs to appeal to your audience senses. And that is a very important step towards executing your marketing strategy, because you need that distinct voice to tell compelling stories and impact people's feelings. So let us pause, and I want everyone in the audience to take a moment and reflect on their identity and voice. Do you know who you are? Do you know what you do? Can you articulate that? Do you know what your voice is? You don't have to put this in the chat. I just want you to reflect, because there are many professionals in the communication departments that we engage with who cannot articulate this. But without this, you will struggle to develop compelling content. And as a university, you may want more of an aspirational tone. And as a government, perhaps more serious tone. Whereas if you're a tech startup, for example, you may wish to be humorous or geeky. Anyway, there is a process to teasing this out, whether you are a small or a larger player. And we do this with 2 main exercises. The first one is the situation analysis, where we assess the micro, meso, and macro factors to identify your strengths and weaknesses, along with the opportunities and threats. And then there is a second exercise called the brand narrative, where we work through 6 elements to help you identify your brand narrative. And this is the heart, the soul, the voice of your brand, so to speak. And in this exercise, you think of your brand as a person. You map the external perception. So what do people already know about your brand, and how can you build on that? You think about the emotional connection you want to establish with the audience. You consider your desired image. How do you want to be perceived? You carefully craft your positioning, answering these questions. Who are you? What do you do? Who are you serving? And why do you stand out from the crowd? And then you use all that information to craft your brand essence statement, which communicates your purpose and promise. Then, if you have done all that, you're ready for step 2. And that is to identify and document who your audience is. So if I were to call upon you, could you list and describe your tribe of people that you are serving? And if the answer is yes, how well could you describe them? How personal can you get? Because a good description doesn't just talk about age, income, postcode. It actually identifies what values, what worldviews, what beliefs or passions your tribe or people share. And by knowing that, you can talk to them in their language. And I love this quote from Seth Godin saying, knowing that you cannot change everyone, it requires you to ask, who is it for? And that's an essential question to ask yourself because it determines everything. All the further steps you take in your strategy, in your tactics, your operations, it depends on your answer to this question. And to answer that question, there's one key thing, and that is to forget what you think is right, to set aside your assumptions. Often we fall prey to making decisions based on what we think is cool or funny or appealing. And while we may serve many people like ourselves, it is likely that our preferences don't match the preferences of the people that you seek to serve. And therefore, the decisions that we make based on our personal preference might not serve our people. So it is crucial that we take appropriate measures to dive deep into this question and dig deep and ask, who is it for? There are many variables that you can use to describe your audience, and the list on this slide is not conclusive, but it's good to understand the differences between demographics, geographics, psychographics, and behavior, where demographics and geographics are often statistical data of a group or a population, such as age, gender, height, weight, etc. Psychographics represent the ideals and values or aspirations of a group. The final one is behavior, where this describes the behaviors that people do and how they behave in relation to your offerings, for example. So whether demographics or psychographics matter the most, that depends on your unique situation. However, what we see is that oftentimes it is more beneficial to focus on psychographics and behavior. Yes, demographics are important, and we often need to include or exclude people with a certain age, gender, geographic location. However, those are not enough to find your specific audience. So often with the services we offer, the common denominator are aspirations. So what do people really care about? For example, if you're providing services to help people lose weight, all people care about is losing weight. And it doesn't matter really whether they're 18 or 55. So that's something to consider in your respective situation. So how do we make these descriptions more tangible? Well, we use personas. And you may have heard of this, but a persona is a hypothetical archetype of a real person. And personas have many benefits. And I have 3 that I'd like to share with you. First, personas make assumptions and knowledge about people explicit, which then creates this common language with which to talk to people in a meaningful way. Second, personas allow you to focus on and design for a small set of specific people who are not necessarily like you. And that helps you to make better decisions. And third, personas engender interest and empathy towards people, engaging your team in a way that other representations of people data cannot do for you. So in other words, personas will help you and your team and your organization to become more people-focused. Then the next step after creating personas is identifying your journey. And you may have heard of buyer journey maps or customer journey maps or journey maps in general. So essentially, a journey map is a visual representation of the process a customer or prospect goes through to achieve a goal with your organization or your department. And so with the help of a journey map, you can get a sense of your customers' motivations, their needs, and their pain points. And the best way to visualize how a customer interacts with a product or a service is by mapping it visually. And so most journey maps start as an Excel sheet somewhere with the tables, with rows and columns, and that's okay because that outlines key events, customer motivations, and areas of friction with the user experience. Then this information is combined into a comprehensive visual representation that describes an average experience with your brand, just like the one you see on this slide. And so by understanding this relationship, you can understand how to structure your touch points to create the most effective and efficient process for your customer. And a journey map maps out the current process from first to final touch point to see if your customers are currently reaching the goals and how you can help them achieve their goals. And that is a crucial component of content marketing because it tells you exactly what stage of the journey you should provide what content, and how will that help them progress to the next stage. And Timo will talk about that now in the third step of the marketing process, which is the hourglass.
Thank you, Yannick. Excellent. And to pick up from where Yannick has left on, if we're trying to achieve any type of change, we have to become very specific in order to guide our approach to ensuring that this transformation that we're seeking to make is also taking place. And Seth Godin has a beautiful quote here that I probably just ruined by the way that I sort of paraphrased it, is that it is exactly about that. And Seth Godin is one of the marketing legends that has written, I think, 20 plus books in a very practical way about what marketing should be and what it shouldn't be, which really aligns with the philosophy how our research center, social marketing, Griffith, also believes in the power of marketing, which we call, social marketing, and how we can enact more positive behavior change using this discipline. And so in the third step here, after we have done the homework of the voice, the homework with our audience, and really figuring out what persona we are going after and prioritizing, how many we even need and how many we should be going after. The next step is to think about really that connection point here to that journey. And I want to help you to understand how we're able to quantify and operationalize these journeys next. So there's a lot of commercial examples on this slide. But I'll make the link to behavior change obviously here as well. But these are obviously things that anyone can relate to when it comes to some of those powerhouses that get us to buy, the streaming service, the fancy sport car, the watch of a lifetime, or your daily exercise gear, or your daily sort of outlet where you can stream your music. So what we do is that we create this marketing hourglass, and we do this for all our behavior change projects where Yannick and I are involved in. And we also use this to help any client organize their journeys. So when we look at this marketing hourglass, we use it to put the logic into an otherwise messy journey. And always, this is an approximation of the truth. It's not perfect because if you think about the complexity of the journey, like I said earlier, it's always going to be slightly unique, slightly different. But this is our sort of heart of the 5-step process, where we are going to look at each of the personas' journeys and how they essentially move from that awareness and exploration phase to that conversion point, which could be, in your case, a behavior change outcome, or perhaps some type of attitudinal change, if that is a proxy to behavior. It doesn't matter what it is. Ultimately, the journey is the same. So we use this hourglass analogy because we want to showcase and appreciate the hard work that is actually required to move your persona from awareness through to the conversion point. And following the transaction, when you kind of again have to work hard from that conversion point to make sure that these people are staying engaged. Some of those behavior change are ongoing, initiatives that require multiple interactions with those personas over a time period. So how do you keep them engaged? How do you keep your content fresh? How do you get them to become your brand ambassadors? How do you get them to talk positively on behalf of yourself? Whatever the journey is, it will uniquely be different. And when you think about the home loan journey, that's 2 years. When you think about booking a restaurant, that is shorter. But if you're thinking about changing farming practices, increasing physical activity, or getting someone to stop smoking, this journey slightly transforms. But it's equally complex, it's mostly equally rich, it's mostly equally time-consuming, but often in the change space, we don't put the same effort and the same amount of thinking into this journey. We are very often obsessed with the notion of let's get some eyeballs, which is the awareness stage. Let's just get in front of people with our message, and hopefully that'll lead to change. But that's not good enough. If you think about a commercial operator and the way that they will get you to move through this hourglass and become their brand advocate, they have carefully crafted out every single step of that journey. And why looking at Nike and Netflix, Porsche or Apple is good is because it helps us to understand what customers, our audiences often, are actually expecting of us when we're engaging with them through our behavior change work. So when we look at this hourglass, it's more than just the 7 stages. And in some cases, it might just be 4. It's about what works for your respective context. So don't get hung up on just 7 stages here. You can simplify this. But what we then do is that we start to set specific objectives for each of the 7 stages. So at the awareness level, it could be as simple as how many people are you actually trying to get your message in front of, using what type of marketing channels, which may be traditional ones, where you really go out there and you find the billboard in your local community because you know that that's going to be seen by those people that you want to affect, to geo-targeted ads, on respective social channels that you may want to undertake. So you set a benchmark in terms of how many people are going to be reached. And that's that top part of the hourglass where you cast the net wide. But then always you need to understand that as soon as these people see your message, not everyone is going to click and interact. And for those that have been watching some of the other presentations of the teams in the different contexts, you would have seen that reach numbers are always significantly higher than, for example, the people that actually end up clicking and exploring a website. So that is then sort of that next step. Once we get the attention, what are we wanting them to explore? And what do we want them to consider? See, anyone that spends money to get a new customer in the commercial sector is thinking about this very hard. What is the landing page that somebody gets to after they've seen my ad? And what do I want people to do on that specific page? And often, again, in the change space, we don't think about this enough. What is that first interaction going to be? And what do we want people then to action as they're on the website? The harder we make that, the more confusing we make it, the more information we put on that respective next touch point, the higher the chances of them dropping off, right? So I guess the takeaways are that there will be a lot of people that see your message, but you will carefully have to nurture every single individual down this journey point, because you will lose people at the exploration stage. You will lose people at the point of where they start to interact with your offering, and some will never become your brand ambassador. So it's essentially like a sales funnel where you're losing people. And as you're losing these people, you're trying to keep that loss as small as possible. But if you haven't built the objectives for each of those stages, and there will be multiple and many, then you are simply stabbing sort of in the dark, and you won't really know where to go. So you have to start with this journey with the objectives, and then you have to figure out, how am I going to evaluate those objectives? And that's where you have to look at some benchmark conversions if you have zero sort of starting point. So first of all, you need to know where you pull the information from: Facebook, Google, YouTube, your Google Analytics on your website, for example, any type of survey data you're getting, people that are potentially answering surveys for you, or you're observing behavior change, whatever that may be. All those things come into this respective hourglass. And if you're pulling all of that together, we also always like to look at, obviously, conversion benchmark metrics across the different sort of stages of the hourglass. So here's a simple way of looking at it. You could look at the top of the hourglass, for example, social ads such as Facebook. And these metrics exist for other social channels as well. But here, what's the average conversion rate that somebody gets organized by vertical when it comes to a person seeing an ad and then taking an action on it, so clicking on that specific ad. That's what you can see here, where the average is about 10%. So if you were to reach, 50,000 people on socials, for example, every quarter, if that's your goal, you might say out of those 5% or 10% will in fact actually end up coming to my website. So that will be 5,000 people or 2,500 people, depending on what benchmark metric you want to utilize out of these different verticals. What is closely associated to your persona and the thing that you're essentially offering, right? Then when we look at out of those people that would actually land on your landing page, how many of those are going to be converting? And so here we can assume that number, essentially could be somewhere between 3 to 20%. And the 20% might be an outlier. But let's say even if it's just 10%, that means out of those 5,000, you would only get 250. And we're not yet at the point where somebody has actually transacted with you, has bought into your behavior change, or has taken you up on your free consultation, or has sold you their $10 guidebook, or whatever that may be. So out of those, we have the sales and e-commerce benchmark metrics, which we just pulled out here for this session today, where we can expect around 3%, right? So that out of 250 people or 500 people, diminishes the amount further to 7.5 or 15 people that may buy or change the behavior as a result of your work. So you can see really this funnel, and you can start to appreciate how important this is, because if you don't know, you're simply stabbing, like I said earlier, in the dark, and you're also not sure what type of content pieces you really should be aiming to have in order to make sure that people will progress through this hourglass journey more effectively. And that's what Yannick is going to talk to you next about when it comes to our fourth step, which is all about content creation, where everyone is usually super busy, but the hourglass is that lead-in point that will help you understand what you need to do, where you should base your efforts on.
All right. Thank you, Timo. It's always interesting to take that deep dive in that hourglass, and which brings us to step 4, content. And the pace of content creation has surpassed our ability to consume all that we receive. Some people get 10,000 messages every single day. So you need content that engages your persona for it to get noticed. And they say that attention is the customer's scarcest resource. So as a responsible marketer, it is your obligation to produce content that your customers value. So step 4 is where, as Timo already said, most marketers are just active and super busy and super stressed out because they push content day in, day out, and they try to find the next SEO hack and just quickly push out another email newsletter and install that chatbot functionality and quickly get an influencer on board so that they can celebrate the success of vanity metrics, telling them that they have reached 50,000 people, but actually they haven't sold anything or engaged anyone. And so everything happens quick, and more. But people haven't done their homework for steps 1, 2, and 3. And therefore, they don't know their voice, they don't know their personas, and they have not sat down to build their hourglass with its objectives and the metrics for success. So therefore, these marketers don't know how to engage their audiences, and they don't know what content strategy to execute, and what content pieces to create, and where to distribute them. And that's a dangerous position to be in, because it means that a lot of your time and energy may be wasted. And we can only produce content that moves the needle if we have gone through steps 1, 2, and 3. So the most important step to nailing your content marketing is to become a problem solver. People go online for ways to solve their problems constantly. And so this is your opportunity to get your foot in the door. And when people consume your content and it helps them to solve their problems, then they will start to perceive you as the authority in the industry. And as a result, they will be more inclined to engage with you or even buy something from you. Because if you solve their problems for free, imagine what you can do for them if they pay you. So become aware of the problems that your people are facing and then think of the solutions. So you need to be aware of the information you want people to know so that they're more likely to progress through that hourglass. And if you're responsible for the marketing in your team or your department, you will have some expertise in your specific industry. And you should use that to your advantage and establish that credibility and that trustworthiness by creating content that demonstrates your expertise. You don't really need to be a master copywriter or a professional video editor to get this right. If you follow the steps, the previous ones and the ones that I will share with you now, you can create content that resonates with people, whatever content that may be. So if you start an advertising campaign on Facebook, for example, this is what you see. The first step is to establish an objective, which is very important. Before you create any content, set an objective. So here you should ask yourself, what do I want people to know? What do I want people to do? But most importantly, how do I want people to feel? So before I mentioned you need a compelling voice to impact people's feelings. And that's because if you succeed in evoking a strong emotion, people are more likely to remember you and even take action, either by making a change themselves or engaging with your content or sharing it with other people, which then also makes you extend your reach. So when you have figured this out, then you are ready to select what content format you will use. Will that be a video? Will that be a blog or whatever? But first, start with the objective always. Then you're ready to create the content. And so we have developed a 3-step content marketing framework to make that easier. So let's explore how this framework, in a nutshell, can help you create content that resonate. The first step is content curation. And this is the process of selecting and organizing relevant existing content to give you an idea of what works, where, and when. And here it's the purpose to stand on the shoulder of giants, so to speak, where you look at what are people sharing, what are people commenting on, what creates engagement, who's doing it well, and in my respective industry, what topics do well, what works. And you can then build on that and bring that into step 2, which is the content creation. So you consider what works and how can I give that my own twist? How can I make something that is even better, that combines the top performing content pieces? And how can I make something that is unique for my situation, which appeals to my audience? And so in step 2, you make choices about what type of content you're going to create and how will that serve your audience. And this step is essential because it ensures that you're not wasting your time. You are very intentional about what you want to create. And you're not just creating posts for the sake of creating them and following all the advice of people of publishing 4 times a day and whatnot. So you're operating on purpose here to make something that is really going to add value to your audience. Number 3 is distribution. All the important work has been done and you're ready to make the world aware of your content. Now, if you fail at this step, all the work may have been for nothing. So in this step, you're very careful about how you will get your content in front of people. And to demonstrate, let me show you this slide, because the hourglass serves you in this 4th step to or as an important reminder to think about what type of content you want to create for which type of journey point. So where your customer is at. And this is where your detailed journey map comes in hand so that you can understand what is needed, when, and where. For example, in the awareness phase, you may use direct response advertising to get as many eyeballs as possible on your content. Then in the consideration phase, you may promote reports or guides to have people further explore your expertise in your offering, or to help people in their experience phase to move down to a conversion. You may offer an online webinar or a free trial of your product or your service. And this is a very important step. If you're carefully considering your persona and you know what their journey looks like, then you can start to identify the crucial touch points to be there with the right information in the right format at the right time. And so that you can solve their problem and make them ready to move down the hourglass to ultimately convert into a loyal customer or a follower or a participant or even an advocate. So Timo will take over now and walk you through step 5 on how to engage people.
Thank you, Yannick. Good timing. The children have just been picked up from daycare, so there may be some disruptions. I love the slide, Yannick, that you finished with in terms of helping us understand that we really carefully need to select which content pieces we are going to double down on, and also the level of thought we have to put into this. Seeing a couple of comments come in here where, it's being said that obviously it's a challenge to come up with a content strategy and that there's a lot of demand for, content and more of that content, and why is it not engaging people? And I think there is a substantial issue in terms of just it being too much and people not taking the time to strategize. And hopefully for everyone that's been here, I know we're obviously only scratching the surface, but the point is to really help you assess where you need to spend most of your time for now before you continue with your current content strategy, particularly if it's not working, if it's not converting, if it's not engaging, because then the homework is important. I think it's a great opportunity now as well to sort of say over Christmas, let's take a moment, let's reflect, let's re-strategize, re-energize for what's to come in 2021. And it's been a tough year for many people. But rest assured, and Yannick will tell you this too, if you create content that is informative, that is helpful, that is assistive, that captures essentially what people are after, then you will cut through. You may need a little bit of money as well if you're trying to do it digitally, but ultimately you will hit a critical mass where people will start to talk on your behalf. I think unfortunately in the change space, we're often not blessed with the same budgets, but that really then requires us to be even more creative about how do we engage the people that we are seeking to serve, and how do we set a new standard, a new norm? Because it's not about having necessarily 5 posts out there on the social channels or 1 email every month. But if you were to do a couple of emails in a year or 2, but there are let's say 2 versus 1 a month, which is 12, how can you make those 2 stand out of the crowd? How can you get those opened by more people because they're longing for that next communication piece? It's not just something we throw at them because we haven't thought about it long enough and hard enough. So less is more, and us really understanding why we have created the content piece in the first place. These things, if you map out an hourglass to the point that we have sort of guided you today with, you will be more effective in the way that you do your marketing, and you will waste less resources externally and internally as well to help you create content pieces that really nurture and move somebody, through the hourglass journey. So we want to prevent you from obviously being the marketer that sits here on this cartoon in terms of, the simple question whether the marketing campaign did what it was set out to do. And sometimes it's also about reminding people that this piece of content up here, this social post, only had one job to do, and that was to get somebody to come to this landing page we created. Now let's talk about these metrics here separately and whether they're performing against industry benchmarks, right? And that's really the type of granularity we need to get to in all the work that we do. And the more we do it, the better we can justify our cases for for higher budgets to execute our campaigns, but to also ultimately demonstrate how well marketing is helping you achieve your behavior change endeavors, or whatever your sort of conversion point there is, because I know it differs in the change space very significantly, and from government departments around the world, obviously, as well. It's also important to go back to that capability framework and really figure out, is my organization, is my team, are the people above and below me buying into this digital revolution? Are they believing that this can help us reach more people? Are they looking at it the right way? Are they enjoying their work? Do they feel like it's making it a more rewarding work environment? And that requires a big paradigm shift from leaders, and obviously also from anyone that works within the organization, right? Skills, where you spend your time on, the organization itself, the entire vertical. So I think that is something to keep in mind, to understand where you fit in and how much change you can realistically make when it comes to your digital sort of transformation journey and your digital marketing endeavors. These are certainly the bits and pieces in the puzzle that can help you become more strategic and hopefully help you make your case more strongly internally to help you succeed more effectively. On the notion of support, it's obviously not easy to create these meaningful one-to-one experiences that we talked about, and being the assistive person at each touch point of the hourglass. That's, like we said, hard work. And I think often many marketers sort of go back to trying to find a software solution that is the quick fix that can help them just overcome all the challenges and just make it all right. And that's obviously not the case. So when you look at this marketing technology landscape, this is a guy called Scott Brinker who created this map, and he pretty much showed us here that over time, when he did it the first time, the PowerPoint slide showing how many marketing software solutions there are, it used to be 146 or something like that, and it has grown to more than 8,000 as of this year. And there's a lot of consolidation as well that has been happening over the last decade. So, there would be even more if the powerhouses hadn't been buying out the little nuggets of gold that sit within this big landscape. The point here is to think about the hourglass. Once you've set your objectives, once you know who your persona is and how you want to speak to them and what resonates with them, and you really understand that entire sort of journey through the hourglass, and you have your content pieces, then it's also a good chance to assess what marketing technology are you already using. So do you have a customer relationship management tool? Is that allowed within your organization? Is this breaching some type of privacy issues within, or for the type of work that you're doing, which may be fine, but what type of software solutions are you already using? Even if it's as simple as an Excel sheet, to what do you need to ultimately deliver on these new expectations in the modern world that people have of you, whether you're, McDonald's, the state government, the local government, or an airline during the times of a pandemic. The benchmark is the same fundamentally because you're competing for the same attention at the same point in time often, right? So I think we need to do these assessments, but if you do these assessments well, you're going to be making a much better case for your respective software solutions that you may need in order to kind of get a touch closer to that gold standard that we have been talking about. And fundamentally, while all of this technology stuff is quite scary and overwhelming, fundamentally what we want to do, we want to be less annoying as marketers. We don't want to shout at people when they don't want to hear from us. We don't want to give in to this notion of just putting out more content, because that's the bad advice that's out there. People telling you to put more out and just essentially trying to give everyone a voice and to shout at all points in time. Yes, that's what Google and Facebook will like, because it's going to give them more money, but it doesn't necessarily help the bottom line of what you're trying to achieve, and it's not going to make the people happy that you're trying to engage. So the takeaways here are, we went through this 5-step digital marketing process on speed. That gives you 5 succinct steps how you can get your agenda organized. So this can help you reach more of the people that you're after and enact more behavior change. So we suggest you stop the research, you work with this framework, and you actually get yourself organized and re-strategize. Once you have the framework in place, that is the data-driven approach that we're advocating for. That takes the that provides you with the objectiveness you need in order to succeed. And then that will help you to unlock more funding. Keep in mind that's what you need in order to do the work better that you're already currently doing. But you need that legwork first before you go probably for the bigger ask. That doesn't have to be highly scientific and huge, but yeah, it needs to be pragmatically well executed, and that can help you tell the story much better. And then work on your management. Anyone that is a leader needs to be fully backing you in your efforts. If you are a leader, please open up the pockets and help people execute against this in order to make sure that they can reach more of the people that they're seeking to transform and improve their lives. I think that is the majority of our content. And Yannick, I think that's the one thing I forgot now is whether you wanted to do our final slides, given you introduced the framework, or whether it was me that was going to be doing that. So I might just get you to join in if you wish.
I have a couple of more slides with some positive words, but I see we're reaching our end. So I first want to give you the value here is we've talked about this 5-step process and we've summarized these 5 steps to digital success also in a written guidebook. So if you are ready to take on this marketing process, you can download it for free on our website. And I'll actually share the link with you in the comments now. And this book outlines those 5 steps and it enables you to get strategic with your digital marketing. So you can review the steps and you can see what are the specific actions that you should take. And I hope that helps you. And I think even though we only have a couple of minutes, maybe there is some time for questions. Please allow me to share this quote by Thomas Edison, who says, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." And so he tried so many times, and with persistence, look what he produced. That changed the world forever. And so it's a famous quote, and some people may find it cliche, but I don't. I believe that this way of thinking is the essence of success. And we believe that if you adopt this way of thinking, you will get where you need to be, and you will be able to operate at your highest point of contribution. So if there's no further questions, that is it from us. Thank you for participating. It's very nice to be here, and we look forward to seeing your light bulb. So if you have, if you have a light bulb moment to share with us, please reach out to us and share your experiences with us. Thank you very much.